the lovely Michael Benyaer. And I'm sure that you guys know him from his work in Reboot, and are all one of the great masterpieces of Canadian television. So basically I'm going to open it up to Michael right now. He has some things to say, and then we'll let you guys ask some questions.
Thank you. I come from LA through agents, casting directors, and recording sessions to this place, the Calgary Comic and Entertainment Expo in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. My format, actor. To act and attend panel discussions from longtime fans, to answer their questions and requests, and to autograph 8x10s. They say the users live outside the net. No one knew for sure, but today, here they are, the fans of Reboot. I just have to say, first off, that I've never done a convention before. Some of you may know that I did one a couple years ago via Skype in Vancouver, but this is the first time that I've ever come face-to-face with fans of Reboot. And I have to say, if I choke up, I'm really overwhelmed by this. You know, I did this show, years ago in Vancouver when I was about 23, and I had been doing other cartoons. And they said they're going to do this new CGI show, and I knew the casting people. I'd worked with them and helped cast. And one afternoon I went into the office, and they had the promo reel of what they'd hoped to do for Reboot. And there was a voice on the reel, and kind of narrating it as the character of Bob. And I walked in and I said, "Is that me?" And it sounded so much like me that I was like, "I don't remember recording this." He goes, "It does sound like you," which was Doug Parker, who was the casting director. And I think at that moment it kind of lodged in his head that I should be the voice of Bob. So I auditioned like many other things, and I was called back and I got it. And it took a long, long time from the first session to actually having the show air, because it was such revolutionary technology. So it was over a year or a year and a half. And I believe even before it aired, I had gone to Los Angeles on a vacation trip, and I was cast through circumstances in the remake of the Johnny Quest show as the voice of Haji. So, which is what prompted me kind of to move full-time or part-time to LA at that time. So before we even get to that, many people ask me, why did you leave Reboot? And I didn't leave Reboot. I continued to record the show in Vancouver. I would fly myself up on my own dime and to do the show. But it took so long to do the show, and they wouldn't give me a long-term contract, which I had with Johnny Quest, which was the reason that I lived in Los Angeles. But I continued to do the show all the way through the second season, and I didn't even know that they had done a third season until someone told me that I had been replaced. So it's okay. It's okay. It all worked out in the end. It all worked out in the end. It all worked out in the end. But I just wanted to put that on the table, so we deal with that first. So I had no hard feelings for them at all, and here we are today, almost 20 years later after doing the show, and it's really touching. Thank you. I think I should just open up to questions and just answer questions. Okay? You want to do that?
I agree.
Or if you have any for me.
I could start off the questions, and then I'll throw it to you guys. Because it was such like a Canadian masterpiece, and that it had all this brand new technology and things like that, what has been like your experience with like computers and things like that, and like what you were saying and dealing with? Like, did you get like are you like big into computers and so got the little like subtleties of it, or?
Well, yeah, I am a Mac user. I have to be honest with you. Mac users over there, PCs over here. It was really, a lot of it was over my head and still is over my head, and I did learn a lot about it doing the show. So there was that, but I did the first 2 seasons, which were more, and then subsequent the 4th season, but I did them, they were more kind of self-contained, almost sitcomish, I would say. Yeah, sitcomish. So I was more attracted to kind of the sitcom aspect of it and the humor of it, So I didn't look at kind of the deeper and subtext of the computer stuff. That was for the fans out there who got that stuff.
All right, and so I'll open it up to you guys. If you have any questions, just raise your hand.
Yes?
Is there a certain line from the show, let's say when you're doing for the recording for an episode that you remember, like something that sticks out in your mind for you when you think of your time doing the show?
Okay, funny question. The question was, is there a certain line on Reboot that sticks out in my mind? When we did the pilot episode, I believe, tell me if I'm wrong, I'm sure you guys know more than I do. I believe it was the Racing the Clock was the first one we recorded, and there was a line which was, "I don't think so." I don't know if you guys remember this, but there was a rap song in the late 80s by LL Cool J called "Going Back to Cali." Does anybody know it? Okay. So there's a line in the song, a refrain he does several times. He says, "I'm going back to Cali, I'm going back to Cali," and then he pauses and he says, "No, I don't think so." Okay? So when I got the script, I thought that it was a reference or a nod to LL Cool J. And I did the line kind of as Bob kind of, giving an homage to LL Cool J. Small world, full circle. I live in Los Angeles most of the time now and I do acting. And I went to an event and LL Cool J was there. And I went up to him and I said, "I just have to tell you this." And I told him this story and he looked at me and he was like, "I like that." So props to LL on that one. The other funny thing is that when I did the Skype thing a couple years ago, someone asked me to do the opening of the show, which everybody knows was on every episode. I recorded that one time in 1994. So I didn't really know the show, the opening title. I knew the first line, "I come from the net." And it's kind of funny because you know how people don't like to hear their voice recorded or see themselves on film or TV? When the show would start, and by the way, I was living in Los Angeles pretty much from the beginning of the airing of the show. So even though it was very popular in Canada, it only aired on Saturday mornings in the States. So when I would come to Canada, I realized it was airing 3 times a day on YTV. And so every time it would start, I would put on the TV, and "I come from the net," and I would be like, I can't hear this. So I know the first line. I know the first line. And it was very funny because, like I said, today, so many people have come up to me. People drove from Saskatchewan for 8 hours, and and they've told me they grew up with the show. And it's just things I could never ever imagine doing this 20 years ago. And the funny thing is that you all know who I am, looking at me now, knowing I do the voice. But when I did this, no one knew. So these are some anecdotes. When I would come back to Canada to record the show in the first 2 years, I would go through customs and they say, "What are you doing here?" I'm an actor. And they go, "What are you working on?" I say, "I'm doing a show called Reboot." "You're on Reboot? Who are you on Reboot?" I'm like, I'm Bob." "You're Bob on Reboot?" And then he's like, "Hey, Dave, this is Bob on Reboot." All that kind of thing. And it was very, very touching, very nice. And I've told some of these anecdotes and I'll tell them again, which was I was flying across country at one point, across Canada. And there was a woman there with her 2 kids. They must have been about 8 or 9, and they were playing with a Bob action figure. And I said, I was a little proud of myself. I said, "That's me." And she goes, "Oh, really? What?" I was like, "Well, I'm Bob." She goes, "Oh, like in a mall?" And I was like, "What?" And she's like, "Oh, like I thought she meant like one of those like things they do in a mall." I was like, "No, that I did the voice." "Oh, really?" She goes, "Well, I have to get you to sign something," and she gave me a barf bag to sign. Somewhere out there, someone is holding a barf bag with my signature on it. Another one, which was really funny, was I do on-camera acting in movies and TV, and I did a movie, must have been 96, 97. It was a movie with Joe Mantegna and Dennis Leary called Underworld. It didn't really do anything.
I saw it.
Okay, all right, thank you. Thank you. So you've seen me in that get killed, shot in the back of the head. And we're in this limousine for, I would say, 5 or 6 days. And they have different versions of the limousine where we get out of half of it so that we can do one side. It's like, a lot goes into this. So I'm sitting with Joe Mantegna, who everybody knows from The Godfather and everything. And he's like, we're talking, and he goes, "So, what do you do?" I said, "I'm actually in town doing this cartoon." And he goes, what do you do? And I said, "I do this show, Reboot." He goes, "What do you do on Reboot?" And I said, do you know Reboot?" He goes, "Yeah." So Reboot. He goes, "What do you do on Reboot?" And I said, "I play the character Bob." "Yo, Bob." And I was like, how does Joe Mantegna know about Reboot? And then he tells me this very touching story. He said, he says, I had a daughter. She's about 8 years old. She's autistic. And he said that she kept saying, reboot, reboot, reboot. And one morning he woke up, early on Saturday morning, he came down and she pointed to the screen, which was Reboot. And she responded to the design of the show, the CGI of the show. And he says, wait till I tell my wife I met Bob from Reboot. So they were here, and I tried to arrange for them to get a tour of the facility, but I think I just had some toys sent to him and his wife. But that was good when Bob from Reboot was known by Joe Mantegna. Sorry.
Other questions?
I was kind of wondering if you did know, of course you do, there are a couple of movies and they ended really abruptly, and people have been trying to bring back the series. What are your opinions on that?
I will say, categorically, I am 100% in favor of bringing back Reboot. On the other end of that, I have nothing to do with bringing back Reboot. But I know that they tried a couple years ago with a thing online called Zeros to Heroes. Is that right? Yeah. I don't know what happened from that, if anything. I don't really know who owns the rights. I know for many years it was a thing where Alliance Atlantis had it originally, and then Mainframe had it, and then Mainframe became Rainmaker and a variety of things, and then Mainframe mostly is a service provider now as an animator. They do a lot of stuff for Mattel. They do Barbie and things like that. And I did voices on a thing called Hot Wheels World Race, which they did. And you know, I think that if enough people make a noise about it, maybe they'll bring it back. But I don't know who to write to. I don't know, your congressman? I don't know. Stephen Harper? I don't know. But I would love it to come back, and I hope all of you would too. Yes?
Do you think it would kind of take away from the show with how good technology is now to how we remember Reboot being so new for its time, ahead of its time? Do you think it would take away from what Reboot was to bring it back and do it now with our technology?
The question is, do I think it would take away from the original look of the show and how it would look today?
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting because when I went to do the movies in 2000, which was the My Two Bobs and all that, and when I saw it, I felt it looked, I don't know, it didn't look the same, right? It looked different. And I think that was supposed to be new and improved, right? Almost better. I think that the idea for Reboot in the first place was that they had this technology which looked kind of crude and primitive. These are the guys that did, Gavin and Phil and Ian, who had done the Dire Straits Money for Nothing video. So they were like, why don't we do a show that takes place in a computer so that there's no question about why it looks so weird, right? So that, in 95, 96, that was, Reboot was cutting edge technology, right? And I think that look fits the world inside a computer, in my opinion. So when I saw the version in 2000, and when Bob was animated, and the two Bobs and all that, it reminded me, this is just my taste personally, of when Toy Story, you're watching the toys and they look like toys, and then you see a person, you're like, it doesn't really look like a person, it doesn't look like a toy, it's kind of not this, not that. So I think if they were to do it, they should do it kind of more of the classic style, in my opinion, of the show. But that's just my opinion, so I don't know. Other question?
There's one in the back, yeah.
Yes?
I just thought Reboot had a great voice acting cast. Did you ever get to work with any of the other voice actors in the show, like actually record with them?
Right. The question was if I had a chance to record with other voice actors in the cast. Yes, when we did Reboot in Vancouver when I was there, we did it very much like a radio play, all that stuff. And it was a lot of fun. And a lot of the actors I'd known for years before, we'd done other cartoons together. I'm trying to think off the top of my head, Kathleen Barr, who was Dot, Phil Hayes, Gary Chalker were Hack and Slash. I'm just trying to throw out characters and I'll tell you who they were. I don't know, Shirley.
Mike the TV.
Mike the TV. Mike the TV, interesting question is, Mike Donovan, who played Mike the TV and Cecil, or Cecil, was an actor, and then when Andrea Romano, the original director, left, he ended up directing the show. So he is a very sought-after director as well as actor right now. A lot of people ask me about Tony Jay, and Tony never recorded in Vancouver with the cast. He did it by himself in Los Angeles. And when I moved there, we had the same agent. So I would see him in the waiting room of this agency, ICM, in the mornings. And one day I introduced myself. I said, my name is Michael Benyaer. I do the voice of Bob. And he's like, oh, really? And he really sounded like that. He was a British actor, Shakespearean trained, who was about 6'5". And he was probably in his 50s or early 60s at the time. And then when they realized that it would be okay for me to go on the recording sessions that he did in Los Angeles, so he would do his lines, he would sit down in the studio with a cigarette and record his lines 3 in a row. He would just do 3 versions of his line by himself. He'd say, I haven't felt as good as my first infection. I haven't felt as good as my first infection. I haven't felt this good since my first infection. And then he'd take a drag of his cigarette and leave. So I watched him do this, and I went in there, we did it, and I did some sessions by myself. I'd say pretty much the remainder of the second season by myself in LA. So I would be done in about a half an hour. So I would get the script, and one of them vividly, which was Bad Bob, which was pretty much me yelling in a studio on Melrose Avenue by myself for half an hour, and I had no idea. I mean, he had the script. He's like, and the producer, Chris Bruff, who talked like this. He was kind of a New York kind of guy. He talked like this. He's like, okay, now you're hanging off of the truck now. Okay, you're like yell like you're gonna die, you know. So that was a lot of that. I don't know. I mean, he was a very nice guy, and I was very sad to hear his passing. So hopefully, if they do reboot again, they would get someone who could sound somewhat like him. Yeah. Other questions? Anybody?
In the back?
Yes, in the back.
I was actually wondering, did you go to university or did you just start out acting?
Thank you. Let's get some education props in here. The question was, did I go to university, as they say in Canada? Yes, I've been acting since I was in high school, and I did my first cartoon. Actually, was a cartoon. I got some notoriety in Canada because I was cast as the voice of Ken for Barbie and Ken, Barbie and the Rockers. I was about 17, and it was very notable because they thought it was very funny that an all-Canadian was doing the all-American. And I remember this was in the news. I was in Maclean's, and I was on Midday at the time. And it was very funny because the Americans were very nervous that we would sound too Canadian doing these things. And I remember I was in the studio and I had a line or two. It was like, I don't know about you. And they're like, you're saying a boot. You're saying a boot. And I said, what? I'm not talking about a boot. No, you're pronouncing about a boot. So I was very conscious to sound American, and I was doing cartoons, and I continued to act in high school, in college, and then I wrote for a television series with 2 friends when I was about 18 for CBC called Pilot One. That was canceled because of a CBC strike, which these things still go on in Canada, I'm sorry. And after that I was like, screw this show business, I'm going to school. So I went to UBC and I got a degree in creative writing, and I continued to act, and I wanted to go to Los Angeles, and while I was in UBC, I was doing cartoons. I was doing a show called Exo Squad. I was doing a show called The Hurricanes, where I played a couple characters. And then I got the show Reboot. And like I said, it went long. And then I was in Los Angeles on vacation for a week. And my first day there, we went for dinner with this woman to pitch a TV show. And she looked at me and said, you're an actor and you do voiceovers? I said, yes. She says, there's a famous cartoon company. Do you do a Middle Eastern accent? And I was like, yes. I was in LA for 5 hours, I was being typecast already. I was like, yes. And so I found out that the show was Johnny Quest and that he was not Middle Eastern, he was East Indian. And she said, same thing. And I was like, okay, welcome to Hollywood. I was like, okay. And I said, she goes, can you do that? I said, yes, I can do an East Indian accent. I said, but I know the show from the 60s and he's 7 years old. I said, I'm good, but I'm not that good. I can't sound 7. She goes, no, he's 17 now. I said, that I could do. So that job got me into Los Angeles, and I did that and continued to fly back and forth to do shows in Canada. And once again, I was very dismayed by the lack of movement in my acting career. I wanted to do more on camera, even though I loved voiceover. And I got into grad school in Los Angeles for film producing at UCLA. I did that for 2 years while I continued to act. That ended. I'm sorry, I'm telling you all my life story here, but I just want you to know that you can be an actor as well as go to school, young people here. And I thought about it, and I was turning 30, and I was like, what am I doing? I need to get a real job, real degree. So I went and applied to law school. And I got into law school in Manitoba. Anybody from Manitoba here? All right. And the summer before I went to law school, they called me up out of the blue and they said, Reboot is doing more movies and they want you back. And I started laughing on the phone. I said, but I was fired. And they said, no, you're going to be back, as is Ian Corlett. And I was like, what? And I was like, that's fine. So we did both, and I did those the summer before I went to law school in 2001. And when I get to Winnipeg, my first week of school, they called me and they said, we want to change the opening for the final season, the last 4 movies of Reboot. And they said, we'd like you to record a new opening, the monologue. And I said, well, that's very nice, but I'm in law school now. And they said, but we'll record you wherever you are. So, just so you know, the opening monologue of the final season was recorded in the CBC in downtown Winnipeg before my criminal law class. So, there you go. I did finish law school. In my last year of law school, I was in Hollywood, LA, for a week of what's called pilot season, to do auditions for pilots for TV shows. I got a pilot. I did an episode of a TV show called The Shield, and I realized that my true calling, my true passion was to be an actor, and I finished law school, got my degree, and I went back to LA, where I've been pretty much full-time for the last 8 or 9 years. So I continue to work in LA and Canada when they call me, and here we are today. And this is really the most touching thing I could ever imagine. I would have never imagined this. Thank you. Is that enough questions, or we could talk some more here?
I think we can talk some more. I haven't seen the elusive 5-minute sign, so yeah, if there's any more questions.
Okay.
Are you still a Canadian citizen?
I am still a Canadian citizen.
Yes.
Thank you. And that's something that's really interesting, because today I realized how much Reboot is very, very Canadian. And it's very much a part of, I think, everybody here who watched Reboot as a kid and grew up with it, it's very much part of their Canadian childhood. Much like for myself when I was a kid, there was a show called Mr. Dress-Up. So when people came up to me today and they said, I grew up with you, I grew up with this character, and I was like, it's pretty much like me meeting Casey or Finnegan. You know? Except I'm talking, I'm not a mute dog. But it's been great because, you know, Reboot was done in Vancouver, and as you all know, on the show, they did a lot of plays or puns on places in Vancouver, the Kit Sector, which is Kitsilano, Broadway, which was Broadway. And even, of course, they didn't like dealing with Los Angeles, you know, ABC, which was why they called it Lost Angles, right? All these things. So it was very good. More questions, or I could just talk, you know, on tangents. Yes?
Do you have a favorite reference?
Do you have a favorite reference?
Yeah, like is like a Los Angeles.
You know what's amazing is that a lot of people ask me when to sign things to write "Stay Frosty." And now this is funny because when I got it in the script, in one of the scripts, it said "Stay Frosty." So I remember saying it, and I thought it was like trying to be like, you know, cool, like stay cool. So I said, "Stay Frosty," like that. And when they told me later, they said that when they originally envisioned, they'd written the scripts before I was officially cast. They envisioned Bob more of a Michael Biehn type character from Aliens, and they thought he was going to be a little more badass. So they said that what happened was that when I was cast, they kind of liked the kind of the fallible hero aspect of it, which was that a guy who was kind of in over his head. And in my mind, it was kind of a combination vocally of Michael J. Fox, which was the voice would always crack, kind of like, I don't know what I'm doing, you know, kind of thing, and kind of a Spider-Man, which was a young guy who was kind of thrust into it, you know, great power he didn't know how to deal with. So when I did the voice, I always didn't want him to be too cool, like to be a guy who was like really a hero. It was kind of a guy who was made a hero unwittingly, you know. So I think that Stay Frosty has really taken on a life of its own because everyone wants me to say it. And I'm going to beat you to it. What's my favorite episode? My favorite episode, and I will say this, I've not seen any of season 3, just so you know, okay? So I can't say whether they're good or bad, I don't know. So, but I did, my favorite episode was one called Wizards and Warriors. That was when we were kind of finding our stride in the first. It was written by a friend of mine who was a writer on the show named John O'Howard, and I thought it was the best usage of the idea of a game within a game, because as an actor, because usually you go incoming game and then you were basically running and jumping and shooting, whereas Dungeons and Dragons, which is kind of a role-playing game, they had a video game version of this, I guess, right? And there was a game on, remember the original ColecoVision called Venture? Does anybody remember that? Okay, so it reminded me kind of that, which is, you had to act as another character. Do you follow what I'm saying? It wasn't just running and shooting, so that it was Bob, was not Bob, he was now the thief, right? So that you had the star of the show, who was the hero, was now playing someone, unlikable. He looked unlikable. He was missing a tooth. He had, stubble. And my favorite line, and people have said it to me, it's funny that it came through, was, prepare to taste the wrath of my butter knife. And there was a lot of stuff that we improvised in that. I remember even Mike Donovan kind of improvised stuff, like as Mike the TV, like television references. I feel like who says it? I mean, you guys can tell me. Who said, "Stay away from me, boy"? Was that me? Or was that Mike the TV?
That was Mike.
That was Mike. Okay, well, I said to him, it's kind of like W.C. Fields. He's like, oh, right. So it was very collaborative at the time. And, the thing is that when people ask me about my favorite jobs in my life, like as an actor, I have favorite jobs for different reasons. I did a movie which allowed me to shoot in India. I did a movie that allowed me to shoot in Morocco, which were once-in-a-lifetime experiences. Johnny Quest, which was an amazing experience because it got me into the United States as an actor, which I'd always wanted to do. And every week I would do the show, and they would have famous actors playing guest roles. I'll tell this now. My first day on the job of Johnny Quest, I had to get there early to the studio at Hanna-Barbera, which was the famed studio where they did the Flintstones and Scooby-Doo and all these things. And I was in the waiting room. I was there early. I didn't know how long it would take me to get there. And the director, Chris Zimmerman, said to her assistant, make sure Mark Hamill has all the sides. Sides is the scripts for an actor. And I said, I beg your pardon? And she said, make sure Mark Hamill has all the sides. I said, Mark Hamill, as in Star Wars. And she said, yes. I said, oh my God, I was so nervous. I was 24 years old. And she's like, well, what's the problem? I said, you don't understand. I'm 24 years old. I said, went from the age of 7 to 13, every day of my life was obsessed with Star Wars. And I said, and I can't even believe he's here. She's like, well, that's no big deal. He has a smaller part than you. Do you know who Robert Patrick is? And I said, yeah, he's going to work with you every week. And I was like, okay. And she's like, you're not impressed? I'm like, no, he was famous after I was a kid. Okay? So it wasn't that impressive. So Mark Hamill is sitting next to me, doodling on his script. We do the rehearsal, we do the episode, I go home. Now, I'm not going to lie to you, I'm a fan of movies and things like this growing up. So I'm sitting on the way home in the car, and I'm like, Michael, your whole life as a kid, from 7 years old, you dreamed of what you would say to Luke Skywalker when you worked with, if you got to meet him, to work with him. You would prove that you are a true fan. You're an idiot. It's like that Chris Farley, stupid, 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 So I said, if I ever see him again, I know what I'm going to say. He's there the next day. So we're sitting at the rehearsal thing, and he's doodling again. Hi, no big deal. No big deal. And there's about a 2-minute gap between the rehearsal session and the recording booth. This is 1996, 95. So I say this question that I've got ready, and I say it in a joking manner, so it doesn't make me look bad if it's stupid. I'm like, hey, Mark, I heard this rumor when I was a kid that when you signed to do Star Wars, that you stipulated in your contract that you would get one piece of merchandise made with everything made with accordance with the film. Is that true? He's like, yes. I I said, really? It's true? He goes, yes. He goes, look, Michael, he says, when we signed to do the movie, we thought it would be a soundtrack and a book. We had no idea that it would be, toothpaste and, records and sleeping bags. And I said, really? And I said, and I heard that you got so much stuff that you had to put it all in an airplane hangar? Yes. I said, really? He goes, not an airplane hangar. He was like, it's a storage space. There's so much stuff I couldn't keep it in my house. And I said, well, what do you do with all this stuff? And he says, well, I have kids. I gave them the action figures, and my daughter shaved Princess Leia's head too. And I was like, wow. And they were just about to do the movies, the new movies, and he was talking about that. So that was very exciting. So, Johnny Quest, Los Angeles, provided me the opportunity to meet all these actors that I admired. If you look at the list of the people who were on it, George Segal was with me every week, Robert Patrick. Every episode I would have, there would be another guest. I don't know, Roddy McDowell from Planet of the Apes. I couldn't even believe it. I was pinching myself every week. So, what's my favorite? My favorite thing about Johnny Quest is it got me to the States. I worked at Hanna-Barbera. Frank Welker, who played the dog with me, was every character in a cartoon ever from 1970. So, and this is before IMDb. So I got this book, which was called the Encyclopedia of Animation. I picked it up in a bookstore in LA called Samuel French. And there wasn't even an index in it because it was so new of this book. And I would go through shows and it was like Laugh Olympics, and I'd come back and I'd go, you were so-and-so and Laugh Olympics to Frank Welker? He's like, yep. And then he would do these dog sounds, which were amazing. And every week I would go back and realize he was somebody else from my childhood, which blew me away. And I love Johnny Quest for that. Reboot I love for one major reason, other than that being Canadian, I'm very proud of that, was that it was a show that allowed me to create the character. And like I said, originally it was supposed to be more of a classic hero type, and that they allowed me to infuse my sense of humor into it. I guess me talking right now, you can hear that. And a lot of my vocal inflections and my timings was put into the show. And I was very pleased that they let it happen like that, and they wrote to my voice later in the show. So I'm very proud of Reboot for allowing me to be a sitcom star, if you will, a Canadian sitcom star in my mind. It's funny, somebody said to me yesterday, they go, I love that show growing up. I never imagined Bob would look like you. Now, in my defense, when we started the show, I had very long hair. I did have long hair, and I had more of a blue tan. But I don't look like the classic Bob anymore. Any more questions? Yes?
On Enzo's birthday, there's a guitar solo which is beautiful. Do you know anything about that scene?
The question was, on Enzo's birthday, there was a guitar solo.
Between you and Megabyte.
Between Bob and Megabyte. Not me. I am a voice actor. I do not play guitar. I had nothing to do with the guitar playing of that episode. I'm sorry. Any other questions? Yes, back there.
I'm just wondering, any episodes that got cut or any parts that got cut that you would have liked to see? Sort of like, what got left on the editing floor that never made it in the season?
Honestly, the question was, are there things that were cut out of the show that I would have liked to see left in? We're talking almost 20 years ago. I'm not going to pretend to remember those things. This is funny. So when the first season, it was a very big deal for ABC, the show. And it was going to be kind of the revolutionary look of their new Saturday morning on ABC. So the network was very excited, and they had Kathleen Barr, who played Dot, and I come in to record stuff for the network kind of meeting at ABC in the States. And our characters were hosting this kind of new Saturday morning lineup for ABC. And it was really fun for me. I wish I could get a copy of it somewhere. If someone has this, let me know. As Bob, I sang Conjunction Junction. Does anybody know Conjunction Junction? Yeah. So this was, as a kid, I loved this thing on ABC, which was called Schoolhouse Rocks. So they brought in these scripts, and they're like, you're gonna introduce that they're bringing back, Schoolhouse Rocks. And And I was like, this is awesome. So I got to sing, what's your function, conjunction, junction. So that's out there somewhere animated. I've never seen it, but I can see that. Oh, and the video game was fun too. Does anybody have the video game? I believe that they made it so hard to play that you couldn't see the subsequent scenes that we did. There was a lot of like acting scenes that we did, but it was very, very difficult to play. Yes, questions over here I saw. Yes?
Was there any point that you realized that Reboot became such a cult hit and had such a following? Was there any one point that really...
Was there any point that I realized that Reboot had become such a cult hit? I'm trying to think. Well, here we are today. This is incredible. I'm trying to think. I kind of knew, but you don't know because I'm not Kiefer Sutherland walking down the street, everyone saying, I love you in that show, right? So that I never experienced it firsthand. I knew. Actually, it's funny. I came back to Vancouver at one point in the 90s, and there were these huge posters for bus stops. And there was like a 6-foot Bob poster at the bus stop. And I was like, this is crazy. I want to copy this. Does anybody have that? Does anybody have that? I'll buy it off you. It just, more and more, I would, yeah. You know what's interesting is that I think because Reboot was about the internet, that I got a lot of emails in the late 90s. People somehow got my email, and people would email me, I love Bob on Reboot. And I didn't understand why or when, and now I understand. In Canada, once again, it aired so often that it was almost beating the Canadian children in submission. You will like this show 3 times a day, you know? But like I said, I wasn't really here to experience that. Oh, this is funny. This is funny. I got into law school, and I'm in Winnipeg, Canada. And I really did not plan very well ahead. You know, and I'm willing to make fun of myself as an adult. I was 31 years old, and I didn't plan ahead where to live, so I ended up living in a dorm with 18-year-olds from small towns in Alberta and the like. So somehow they found out I was an actor and was living in Los Angeles, and everyone on their doors, I was 31, it was like a movie, it was like a comedy movie, like back to school. I'm 31, living with 18-year-olds. And they put on our doors where we're from. Everyone said, you know, from Morden, Manitoba, from Calgary, and mine said Hollywood. So they called me Hollywood, and they found out, you're reminding me of another story I can tell you. They found out that I did the voice of Bob. Now, I think anybody here, if you were to meet me at a coffee shop or a cocktail party, and I was like, what do you do? I'm an actor. Like what? I was the voice of Bob. No, you're not. Why would I make that up? I don't know. You don't look like Bob. So these kids were kind of skeptical, and this was the beginning of downloading. This is about 2000. So one night, I'm falling asleep on my bed, and I hear my voice echoing down the hallway from Reboot. And the guy comes to me, this guy Brett, I remember Brett Medill, and he says, he goes, you weren't lying. You're Bob from Reboot. I was like, yes, I am. So this is around the same time your other jobs that I've done, and I think you guys, animation fans, will appreciate this. I was friendly with Seth Green at the time, who was dating my friend. And he knew that I did voices, and he says, we're going to do this show for the internet, for Sony, for a website called Screen Blast, called Sweet J Presents, and it's going to be kind of like a Saturday Night Live with action figures. I said, sure. He goes, you want to do it? I said, sure, whatever. I did it for free. Like, it was like for fun. We did record it in a garage, okay? So we did this, and then about a year later, he wanted to do it for the Cartoon Network, and they wouldn't let them use the footage they'd done for Sony. So they said they wanted to redo it. So he calls me up again. He goes, now, Michael, would you like to come back and do the voices you did on Sweet J? I'm like, yeah. He goes, and I can pay you this time. I'm like, all right, sounds good. Now he goes, now what happened was, this show ended up becoming called Robot Chicken. Did everybody know Robot Chicken? So when we did the original thing, if you get the first season DVD, on the DVD you will see the original stuff from Sweet J. Now, I do a lot of different voices, and at the time, we were just doing this as a gas, and there was a sketch which was a spoof of the Karate Kid, which made the Karate Kid, which was Joey Fatone, from New Kids in the Block, is that right? NSYNC, sorry. Okay, and it was the sketch was called Enter the Fat One, Fatone, get it? Enter the Fat One. So I voiced in that originally Joey Fatone, Mr. Miyagi, and some, Yakuza at 1 or 2, or something like that. So when it came time to do the show now for Cartoon Network, they got Joey Fatone, and they got Pat Morita, Mr. Miyagi. So they said, do you want to do Yakuza number 2? And I'm like, sure. The only one that they couldn't replace me on, and interestingly enough, was there was a character, they did it twice, called Hoop Hoop Rast. Does anybody know this? Which was a spoof of Japanese game shows. Hoop Hoop Rast, with the Japanese accent that it Hoop Hoop Rast, and this guy yelling Hoop Hoop Rast. So I remember Seth, he's like, we couldn't find anybody else to do it better than you. So you're doing Hoop Hoop Rast. So that came about, and I never in my life thought that would be something. Never. I would go back. I remember I was doing the cartoon in Vancouver, and at that time I started my kind of on-camera career, started taking off. I had been on 24, on The Shield, and these different shows. And I was in a session in Vancouver. He goes, "Hey man, I saw you." I was like, "Oh, you're 24, The Shield." He goes, "So a robot chicken, man." And I was like, "Oh, right," because they put your name at the end of the episode, like single card, like it's a TV show. So people knew that I was doing this thing, and it was a very nice kind of resurgence in my voice career. Another question. Come on, guys. Yes, sir, in the back there.
Is there any project or anyone you would like to work with in the future?
The question is there any project or anyone I'd like to work with in the future? Thank you. You're giving me anecdotes to say. As a child, I dreamt of working with Luke Skywalker. I got to do that. Check. Okay. My childhood hero as an actor as a child was Henry Winkler, The Fonz. I ended up doing a sitcom pilot with him. Check. The next on my list is Steven Spielberg. I would like to act with Steven Spielberg in a film. I was on a little role a couple years ago. I got a little part in the Transformers 2. I worked with Michael Bay. And then I got a part in the G.I. Joe live action movie. Now, if anybody here says they saw me in the movie, they're lying. Because I went to the audition and I said I did a voice on the original show. And she's like, really? We've got 5 minutes left, so we'll wrap it up. She said, what character were you? I said, I was a character called Scoop. She goes, I don't think he's in the movie. I said, I didn't think so either. So they cast me in the film. The producers thought it was cool to have an actor who was the voice actor of the film. And I was cast in what ended up becoming Destro's lair and the missile command and all this thing. And I was like, 10 minutes to launch and all this kind of thing. So this is the life of an actor, okay? I'm not a superstar. I'm not a nobody. I'm in the middle. So I do 2 days of filming. And a year later, they call me to do looping. You guys know what looping is? Where you fix the dialogue on camera in the film. So I'm called into the studio, and they're having me add lines. 3, 2, 1, launch, we're ready to go, all this stuff. And I'm watching the scene over and over again. I realize, I'm not in this. I'm not in the movie. So I said to the guy, I'm not even in this. He goes, oh, yeah, yes, you are. You're in another scene. I'm like, no, this is my only scene. He's like, oh, we didn't call you up to embarrass you. No, I'm so sorry. I'm like, no. I'm like, my voice will be in the film? He goes, my name? Yes. My residuals? Yes. Okay. Okay. Right. So 2 days later, I get a phone call, and a guy says, hi, Michael, this is Steve Summers. I'm so sorry. I said, what? What are you talking about? This is Steven Summers. I said, oh, Steven Summers, the director. Oh my God. He goes, listen, my own daughter was cut out of the film. And I said, I'm sorry, don't worry about it. But the irony is that I have a bigger part I'm the voice of the ship in the movie. So that was me and G.I. Joe. Any other questions before 4 minutes to go here?
Yeah, we have time for one more, so make it good. Come on.
Thank you. What am I doing these days? Everyone asks me. I still do voiceover. I do a lot of video games. In the last couple of years, I was in Uncharted 2, Uncharted 3, its various characters. I'm in Assassin's Creed Revelations. I am Doreen, the son of Altair. I just recorded XCOM. I just recorded End of Nations. Oh, this is fun. The job I'm doing right now is I am the promotional trailer voice for the Dictator movie coming out with Sacha Baron Cohen. The irony is it's the in a world voice, but with a Middle Eastern accent. So you might have seen the promos on TV, which was, in his country, he was on top of the world. But now, he must start from the bottom. Sacha Baron Cohen, Dictator, May 16th. So much. Jim Sue is selling books, which are the art of reboot. You should come to his kiosk there and buy some books, and I'll sign up for you. And I really want to thank you all so much. Really, this has really touched me. I'm really sincere. Thank you. Stay frosty.